Hello, hello, hello. If you're joining, please like and subscribe. I am very, very excited to be joined by Jim. And by the way, I should apologise firstly. I don't wear caps on camera. I'm not having a midlife crisis.
No problem. No problem. I mean, if that's a sign of a midlife crisis, then I'm done for, because we've got this. We've got, this is a new one. It's a little extra. It's a little.
I don't think so. I think you've toned it down, if anything, Jim. I think you are looking pretty on point, I would say.
I mean, you could have just stopped it at pretty, but thank you very much.
Firstly, how the hell have you been during what I can only describe as this?
It's been tough. Luckily the main business, the whole YouTube and everything, the Patreon that supports the business, that's been fairly corona proof. We've done okay there, thank God, because YouTube as a medium has not made it any easier for many creators. So that was good. Not being able to do the pro wrestling side of what I do, that's been hard. I managed 2 shows last year. Some things are opening up now, so that's good, but that was difficult. But otherwise, I'm in a weird position where there's a lot of hassle and a lot of fires to put out, but on a personal level, I'm doing really well. So, it's swings and roundabouts, I suppose.
So what LGBTQ people we always do is always remember the plus, is whenever we always talk about, often when we meet for the first time, about how we came out, etc., etc., etc. And we're going to go down that route. That's what we're going to do. So you're one of the most high-profile non-binary people on YouTube. So tell me about...
Don't say it. If you don't say it, then I don't have to have it play on my mind.
Oh, good point. No pressure.
Oh, no,
I'm just saying the facts, though. That is a fact. So tell me about that road to coming out. And there will be some people, by the way, who don't fully understand what does non-binary mean. So I know it's a bit eye roll for, going back to the basics, but just tell me about both those things.
Well, I mean, as bloody hell, as old as I am, there are basics that I don't know. There's still a lot that I'm still learning about myself and everything else. But I mean, simply put, it's not being on the gender binary, not being either or, man or woman, in a this 1-2 black or white cis sense. And that can mean different things for different people. For me, it is something of a rejection of a lot of the masculine elements to myself, and also feeling like there were already a lot of feminine physical elements that were already there that I am now in the process of enhancing. So even though I don't consider myself transitioning to becoming a binary a binary woman, so for me, it's not about transitioning to becoming a binary woman. I do not consider that. I consider myself trans feminine and non-binary, and on a personal note, gender trash. And that's where I am. It's very much a personal thing. It's why I hesitate when I explain things, because I can only really talk about my experiences and I try not to speak for anyone else. So it can mean different things for different people, but at its most simple, it's it's not a binary gender.
How did you find it when you came out, the response, and what have you learned that, I don't know, for a non-binary person who's out or not out and thinking about it, what would you tell them for what you've learned?
So it's been weird. Especially having been online and having an online media career for so long, to, I guess, from some people's perspective, to have this sprung on them is, there's been adjusting. People have been the people who didn't immediately unsubscribe have been doing really well with learning and everything, and seeing that I haven't changed. Like, I'm still me. I'm just happier and more me. So that's been interesting. It was very scary doing it publicly in such a big sense. Even though I didn't play it up, I just did it one week because I just couldn't go back anymore. And that was, as far as my coming out goes, I kind of led a bit towards it. My plan was to go a lot slower than I have. I mean, my initial plan was to explore it more in the wrestling side, where there's a lot of open expression in character, so you can explore certain things. But obviously that didn't happen because I wasn't doing any wrestling events. And then just the more I played with things, the more I explored things, I found it like the trans snowball, I call it, where it's just the more right it feels, the more obviously you want to go after it because it feels right, because finally you are you. So once you open that door, it's hard not to just throw yourself in full tilt. But there was this period of finding myself, and that was expressed through the show that I do. That was expressed through the Jimquisition, various references, basically leading up to it. That wasn't planned. The actual coming out was a surprise even to me, because I just did it one morning while filming. But for the first little hints was when, and I say little hints, it was pretty clear. I was making little references to not really identifying as male in the truest sense. And then when Cyberpunk had come out and was getting involved in some controversies, and I was covering those, I made a reference to how I was taking HRT instead of playing Cyberpunk, which is more punk. You know, I was making a very important point about punkness. You know, it's Punky Brewster, HRT, and then Cyberpunk's like really down like the bottom somewhere after like actual cyberpunk and punk music and steampunk and punk. So yeah, those were the little hints. And then I started expressing myself more in my apartment building, and it went great. The first time a man who didn't know me saw me, offered to help me with my shopping, that's never happened before. And that was followed by another man offering to help me with boxes, that's never happened before. Neither has the cry of "whoa" when I could pick them up. And what's funny is I'm stronger now than I was, because for some reason, the more femme I've gotten, the more I've gotten into cooking steaks and lifting weights. So I've got a clear idea of how I'm going to look, which is why it's been easier to go after it than it has in the past. It's quite something. Sorry.
What do you think about the fact there was recently a poll, polls on both sides of the Atlantic, but in the US, and it found, so of the different generations, so we've got your boomers, you got your Gen X, you've got millennials, and you've got Zoomers, and I'm an older millennial, so I get.
Oh, I'm the same early run millennial. Can't quite understand Twitch, but
yeah, exactly. That's. I mean, I don't understand Twitch at all.
Mm-hmm.
And you see all
the full URL, www. And yeah,
that's me. When I see Zoomer chat about millennials, I get quite distressed, like ridiculing.
Oh, I've started going through a complete midlife crisis. Like it's boglins and slimers, and like I guess the generation before me would get flash cars and get young girlfriends. And I mean, you know, not a young girlfriend, but we're going steady.
Yeah, steady-ish.
Yeah,
that's been going on.
You know, we get what
this poll showed is quite interesting. It showed that of the Zoomers, the youngest people, 54.6%, only half of young people say they're exclusively attracted to the opposite gender. But
Mhm.
equally, it showed that about 11.3% identified as trans, the youngest people, but they didn't say they didn't go into non-binary and so on. What do you think that says that more and more people, the younger people get, the more and more people feel open to say that LGBTQ and of course trans, to put themselves, and that does include people who are non-binary, even though it's not listed?
Yeah. So it's twofold, I think. The first is safety in numbers, simple as. You feel safer coming out if you see people like you, especially if you're originally from a community or still in a community or family situation where it is not seen as acceptable to be trans. It is something to be punished or forced out of someone. So to see other people coming together and sharing their experiences and finding out that so much of those experiences are relatable, that you're not alone, because that feeling that you are uniquely broken, that you are uniquely inadequate, that you are uniquely unable to fill the gender role that was given to you, that you were told you had to live up to. It is terrifying. It is isolating, to say nothing of our exterior efforts trying to isolate people, or indeed these aforementioned communities. So I think that's a crucial element, is the safety. The other element, and this is certainly something I've been seeing since coming out visibly, and my audience seeing that, is, well, I said visibly. Visibility matters. Visibility is vital. There is a reason why certain parties do not want LGBTQ plus issues taught in school. They don't want it referenced because visibility kills people's ability to question themselves, find people like them. It's burial and erasure, specifically, well, for the reasons that my generation were so successfully, well, I guess successfully from their perspective, unable to find ourselves, unable to break out of these roles that had been decided upon for us and for, the world at large. Visibility is one of the most crucial things. Since coming out as visibly trans femme, I have had many viewers say they started to question themselves, explore themselves, or seeing me up there doing it in front of people gave them the courage to do it again, that sense of safety, that sense of seeing someone like themselves, someone they can relate to in some way. I often bring up, when I talk about this, growing up in the UK, which is where I originally was from. I have not been back in a long time because the fat phobia, the fat phobia was violent enough, to say nothing of a lot of the scary turfism that I see emanating from the place. But growing up in the UK, like you, early millennial, born in the 80s, the closest to gay representation I would ever see on TV would be Lieutenant Gruber from Hello Hello, who was himself a very problematic gay character. And yet, for a one-note gay joke on-screen Nazi officer, he was one of the only closely relatable characters on television. And had been there all my life, because Hello Hello had not long started. Christ, I'm old. It had not long started. So that was, for a long time, that was all I knew, and for some reason found some affinity with the character. Not the Nazism. I can't stress that enough. Not the Nazism.
I like that. Urgent clarification. There was no sympathy going on with the Nazi fanaticism. FYI. important to get that out there.
That was a big thing, and that was how I found safer ways to express myself, was the camp and playing things for laughs and doing stuff like that, or playing with it as a heel in the wrestling, because so many villains are presented as some form of queer in some way or another, which I think is why a lot of LGBTQ plus people my age are now like horny for demons and things. I think it's just a function of how we were brought up. But yeah, like I didn't get to see people like myself. People will tell you that like non-binary as an identity is new. It was invented by Tumblr. But no, I mean, there are examples throughout history of people being gender fluid or outside of the binary in some way, shape or form. But with so few examples, with so little community allowed to build, the language wasn't there. This is why it looks so trendy to people, because trans people are trying to rebuild a culture that was destroyed systematically across the world through history. So little of it is actually new. It's rediscovered. And that's, again, why seeing yourself is so important, why seeing people like you is so crucial, why I was so screwed, and why so many other people of my generation were so screwed by the fact that in the UK, in the 90s, growing up, television had only just started to accept that bisexual people existed. And even then, half the time disparaged that existence, said it wasn't real, said that wasn't a real identity. The old jokes as well, there's no such thing as bisexual, it's just greed, all of that stuff. Which, what can you do then? You've been told what your gender is, one of the two. You have then seen nothing but villains and jokes who are the closest to who you feel you could be. And then you start growing up and trying to settle into the role of man or woman. And if it's not you, you will be made to feel not just by yourself, but by others, inadequate, broken, defective, just this unsalvageable failure of someone who can't live up to what they were told to live up to. And when you finally see other people, and even when it comes to seeing more non-binary people, it wasn't until I saw more trans femme non-binary people, such as Vema Sophie, who's Curio on YouTube, because a lot of non-binary people I was aware of or knew were very masc presenting, or there was the, more of an androgynous element. Lots of different presentations, but for a while I didn't see something that made sense to me. And then as I saw more examples of what felt right, it just felt right. It was how if you would ask someone says, how do you know you're cis? A common response would be, I don't know, because I am. And I found my because I am. And that was very important. And I had to wait a very, very, very long time to find it. And if the culture I grew up in had its way, I never would have at all, and would have not lasted longer. I would be perfectly blunt about that. Not lasted longer. I was waiting to die.
I mean, that's one of the things I want to talk about. I mean, before I do, by the way, I need to urgently correct myself. Just disseminating just false propaganda on YouTube. So I should probably correct myself. 11.7% of American LGBTQ people identify as trans. And amongst Generation Z, it's 1.8%, which is 9 times higher than baby boomers. As is the number of lesbians, 1.4% compared to 0.4% boomers. gay, 2.1% compared to 1.2% baby boomers, bisexual, 11.5% compared to 0.3% of baby boomers. Just so everyone's aware, Generation Z is people born basically after 1997, boomers between 46 and 64. So also, though, others, only half, as I've said, of Zoomers say they are exclusively heterosexual. So I just want to get that absolutely right before people Google and go, what the hell are you talking about, Owen? Just coming onto YouTube and go, blah, 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 with false information. So, or on the podcast, because this is also on the podcast. Hello to the podcast. What I'm going to talk about there, what you just said, is really, 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 really important, and very important for people who are not LGBTQ people to understand, people who are cis, who are straight, which is the damage inflicted upon LGBTQ people by a society which refuses to accept LGBTQ people for who they are. And that's particularly acute, of course, for trans people. And we know that suicidal ideation, mental distress is much higher amongst LGBTQ people, particularly amongst trans people. We know that harmful self-medication like alcohol and drug abuse, which comes from mental distress, which is much higher amongst LGBTQ people, and all of us have personal lived experiences, either our own experiences or people around us who've been so, it's like a ticking time bomb is often inserted into people by society or by their parents. Parents know best. No, they don't. Not always. There's lots of LGBT people can testify. Just talk a bit about that harm that is done from your own experience, and also maybe from the wider experiences you see of LGBTQ people by that refusal, that ingrained, which is there from centuries of patriarchy and heteronormative assumptions, and which are so dominant and people have struggled against, but they're still very strong. What impact does that have, and on you as well?
No other term will do for me. It's a cultural genocide. We're seeing this in the UK now, trying to legislate trans people, especially trans youth, out of existence, just to try and stop us from happening, just to try and stop us from existing and being seen by others. And you give me those numbers about the generational increase in those who identify as trans or non-exclusively heterosexual, and that doesn't tell me we've got more queer people. It doesn't tell me we've got more people who are LGBTQ plus. It tells me we lost many. It tells me we lost so many before now, either due to the issues you've mentioned, the stuff that actually ends a life, or people who have buried it and gone through their life just, if it's anything like me, a shell that doesn't feel real. And doesn't feel quite connected to the outside world and doesn't feel alive. And as I said, waiting to die. From my perspective, there is a way I've always wanted to look. There is a way I've always wanted to be. There is, at times I didn't acknowledge it or decided it wasn't for me, that I didn't get to have certain things, and left it at that. One thing I noticed after coming out was my relationship with eating changed. My, as I said, my lifting of weights, my going for the things, everything I said I couldn't have, not just transitioning, but everything I said I couldn't have. And I found things out, such as I had to take a test to work out what some chemicals were doing inside of me. And found out that my body, for example, responds above averagely to exercise. But I wasn't motivated to do it because I did not expect to live particularly long and didn't care to, and was in fact waiting for it. And instead, since coming out, since finding myself, since being more me, my unhealthy coping mechanisms pretty much just gone. My desire to live has manifested in my becoming half the size I was, and counting, lifting not every day. You take breaks so your arms will fall off, but as much as is safe right now, and increasing. And my ambitions, certain things I wouldn't go for before, have well, they've been manifesting. The stuff's been happening that I never thought was possible, and now everything does. And I spent up until now my entire life trying to be someone else, because that's what I was led to believe was the only route, was the only option. I was as a child, I was shamed for physical traits I have that were not masculine enough. They used to call me hipster at school because I've got some widens, which of course now I'm quite proud of. But back then it was stuff I wanted to be proud of. Weight distribution, my voice, which has deepened over time, but for a long time had not. It took a long time before I ever needed to shave, like more than average, and all of this stuff I was mocked for. When really, like now, I'm like, again, talking about the physical advantages I had that were ignored and weren't capitalized on. I had a bloody head start on this transition, Lark. Like I'm already like close to where I want to be, and the fact that I was a perspective shift away this whole time is, I'm more than that. I am excited about the future, and I'm excited to move forward and the changes. And one thing I always want to point this out is, weight for people means different things. There are those who, fat pride is something I believe very strongly in. Fat phobia, absolutely, not just for personal reasons, obvious personal bias, just it's grotesque. So fat pride is something I believe in, and there are people for whom it's a choice, but there are people for whom it's a symptom of something else, and that's what it was for me, because I wasn't proud of it. I was not happy. There were things I wanted to do that I couldn't, and increasingly now can. And as I say, I'm getting closer and closer to where I want to be, and it's exciting. And that's only my personal journey. That's what that represents to me. And more than that, it's being able to go outside and not feeling like I have to apologize for myself. A lot of the dysmorphia about the weight itself going away. Looking at myself as realistically, what I am, rather than this, unviewable, untenable monster that I saw everyone else looking at. And this was the night before I filmed myself visibly coming out. I went out fully presenting with some friends. And it was the first time, and it was also the first time I'd ever been outside, not trying to hide, not feeling like I can express myself in any way. I'd go out, black t-shirt and black slacks, and leave it at that. Look amorphous, try not to be seen. Now, I'm wearing all sorts of garish nonsense, really sort of honing my trash girl aesthetic and having a sense of style. And I've been told the way I hold myself in a photo is different. The way I just everything about me. A lot of people say I have a glow to my skin now and credit the estrogen, but no, that's always been all me. So let's not credit anything to the awesome skin, but everything else is just so much slotted into place, and all the pieces were there, and that's when I think of the damage and just the life not lived, and when I think about others in that situation, it tears me up. So again, like, now that I have come out visibly and I have the visibility that I have, I think it's probably the most important thing I've done with my job, that I have given other people a chance to see themselves or someone similar. And a lot of people have told me that they've changed, and for the better as a result. as a result of that, and having a part to play in their own journey like that is a privilege, an absolute privilege.
Absolutely. And I have to say, when I said I was interviewing you on Patreon, people were pretty excited. So just for example, just a couple of questions from Patreon. So Juliet says, I'd like you to ask them about their experience of transitioning in the US and how different accessing trans healthcare is compared to their trans friends in the UK. And David Barwater says this is personal for them. Bipolar and being a big figure in one of the most toxic and abusive communities online, how do they cope with it all? I personally am also bipolar, and I'm like made of glass most of the time. I just think you, Jim, are remarkably strong. So what do you say to what about both of those?
First of all, thank you to both, and I'm glad people were interested in little old me. But yeah, so the first question, transitioning as opposed here as opposed to the UK. Again, I can't speak for anyone's experiences who are actually in the UK. I have a lot of UK trans friends and have seen the struggles they have, the humiliating difficulty they have just to assert who they are. I spent 12 years in Mississippi, and again, no representation whatsoever of any kind. It's a very Stepford place down there. Like, they've kind of already won, so everyone's kind of really nice. Mm-hmm. But there's an air of just don't rock the boat now. So that was its own level of creepy oppression. And then I moved here. Well, during the pandemic, I moved to Philly, so I haven't got to see much of the place yet. I've been here over a year now. Looks nice. I mean, the skyline now looks like a cardboard cutout, but like it would have been a good place to live. But I mean, I almost burst into tears the first day I came here. First, Mississippi wouldn't let me leave. I was stuck there 24 hours trying to get my last flight out, then had a wrestling booking, so I had to go to Pittsburgh first and then bus it to Philly. But the first day I got to Philly, me and my friend Conrad he was showing me around town, showing me the shop where he sells his buttons and everything, pinfultruth.com. And in there was a lot of, LGBTQ plus stuff. And then I see the variety of people holding hands and expressing themselves as couples who are not, cis hetero couples. And I almost lost my, everything then and there, because it had become such an alien idea that it could happen anywhere but television. The fact that there was a place where people could just be them and it was fine. It was almost too much to handle, having spent all that time in the UK, then all that time in Mississippi, especially in situations where I was trying to be the wrong person, trying to live up to the wrong ideals. It was huge. It was indescribable. And then, of course, the differences in just the amount of paperwork and humiliation and having to justify yourself to cis people over and over again to express who you are in the UK versus certain states in the US, Pennsylvania, where I am being one of them, where when I applied for my ID card, I didn't even know when I applied for the ID card. I got the form, was filling it out, and was like, had the gender, and there it was, non-binary. And I was like, holy crap, Conrad, did you see this? And he's like, oh yeah. So I'm like, well, crap, all you have to do is just sort of basically swear that you are, like you take it seriously, like signing to that effect. And that's it. Like, you've just got to be like, I'm not taking the piss here. And here I am swearing to it. And then I have an X on my card, and US culture is still such that I'd be afraid to have a cop look at it, but having it it was important, and there is just such a gulf of a difference between here and what I know about the UK right now and Mississippi, in different ways. As for the second question, Being bipolar, basically, I knew I had some form of depression, and when I first mentioned that, as far as doing it in front of the hardcore gamers trademark, and there were those quick to blame some of my review scores on that. Oh, I wonder if they gave this a 6 out of 10 because they were depressed. But I mean, I've had people now present me since being open about my diagnoses. They've tried to present me as on a mental decline. But for that sector of the internet, it's not unusual. I mean, that's one thing about the abuse I've gotten. None of it's new. The moment they caught a whiff that I might be coming out soon, they started with the "you'll never be a woman," and I'm like, because it's copy pasted. And that's one thing that again, the visibility helps, because you can tell other people that shit they're telling you, like, it's personal, but it's not personal. They're just lashing out at anyone, and what they're saying about you is not true, because they're yelling it at anyone who they think will listen. So it's hard not to take it to heart, but remembering that means, even though there might be a sting now and then, I can move on. And it's the same with the mental health stuff, the mental decline, and of course claiming that the transition is part of that, when actually it was a result of finally having my own sort of environment where I could be safe and happy. So, then they've gotten so much of it wrong because they don't know what they're talking about. And again, same goes with the diagnoses. Last year, this was another problem I had with just being told that it was a problem with me, who I am as a person, not an illness, not something physical, brain chemicals and whatnot, or trauma. And that's what I found out I had, and couldn't believe I managed to hold down a career. The bipolar and the CPTSD and the ADHD, which, blimey, that's a thing. There are people that want to use that against me, but it's the exact same thing we were just talking about with visibility. Visibility is vital. It allows people to see that they're not defective, that they're not broken, that they're not abnormal, that their experiences, while theirs can be relatable to others, and there are others who are, you can relate to in turn. One thing I say is, no one is a unique, special flower, and usually that's said to insult someone, the whole liberal snowflake thing. But when I say no one's a snowflake, what I mean is, like, no one's alone. No one is so uniquely them that struggles they have can't be understood by someone, or they can't understand their own struggles. And that, again, is why people being open about their issues, even in the face of if they can do it safely, of course, that's something I would always encourage someone to be visibly them, especially if it's stigmatized, but only if it's safe for them to do so, only if they feel secure, which, again, is a function of what I was talking about. It all comes down to representation and visibility and safety.
Sorry, this is Rickman, who's just trying to yowl at you. Do you want to say hello? Say hello to Jim. You can say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Just gonna. Oh, I don't know what you're doing there. So, a couple of other questions. Okay, I'm going to be honest with you, Jim. Do I game? No, I don't really understand gaming. I used to play Civilization 3 a lot.
Yeah.
But about 16 years ago, I lived with a gamer. Oh, they game all right. They're gaming right now. So I'm familiar with gaming. What Ollie Skillman Wilson, who does know about gaming, and like me, who just looks like at the moment a pound shot Macaulay Culkin in Home Alone, do game makers have a responsibility to create experiences that encourage positive player behavior? This is actually a really good question. Or challenge toxic narratives given the history of abuse and exploitation in the game community? And further, if that question is not enough, could games be a good space for activism? Shoot, go for it. I have no idea what's going on, but I do. I mean, they're good questions.
The latter question, sure. Every space can be good for that. Make it a space for that. If they won't let you, be loud. So yeah, like gaming can be a space for activism, both in games and within the community. As for a responsibility, I would say this. I would say game companies have a responsibility, not just because it's the right thing to do and because that visibility, again, is vital. A game like Iconfell, which came out last year, I think. Yeah, last year. It's such an important game. One that does not get the publicity it should, because the sheer variety of queer representation in that game it's unlike anything a mainstream game would dare to do. Like they'll throw in a character and then make a big PR deal out of it. But Iconfell is just 100% earnest and sincere and comprehensive almost. Well, I won't go that far, but diverse in its representation. That's one element. Just, it'd be nice. Yes, a representation is something they should be responsible for, given the toxicity of the gamer community, not just because, well, as industry leaders, they should also be community leaders, but these publishers encouraged it. These publishers encourage it by geeing people up with hype and telling people that political elements they're exploiting in their games are not political, and taking part in the burial and erasure and non-representation for decades and decades. And I'll throw in another one. They don't only have a responsibility to represent because of abuse in the gamer community, they have a responsibility because of the abuse in the game industry. These companies, especially a game publisher like Ubisoft, which spent decades covering up for abusers of every single kind, and has gotten away with it and continues to do business. And they're only one story. It's all over that industry. And as far as representation goes, they make token efforts for self-serving reasons almost all of the time. I will leave room for exception, but so much of it is pure hypocrisy. And yes, they absolutely have a responsibility, especially if they're going to dabble. They have a responsibility to not dabble and to pay people who have lived the experiences they're trying to emulate. And then they would screw it up less. That'd be good, wouldn't it?
That would be quite handy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be useful.
Just, throw that in there. As well as gaming, wrestling. We're diving up. You have many, well, you literally do have many hats. But I mean figuratively in this particular. For those who are listening on the podcast. Let's have a look. For those who are listening on the podcast and can't see you, well, you're missing out, so you should probably watch the video. But Jim has a superb array. Let's have a look at this. Oh, hello. It's a Rise hat. What is this? Oh, this
is a Rise title belt.
Oh, sorry, this is a Rise title. This is a big wrestling Rise title thing.
Yeah, this is the Grand Championship of Rise. It's a company I general manage over in Pittsburgh as Commander Sterling. And for the duration of the pandemic, I thought it was only fair to strip the current champion, Tony Johnson, of the title and install myself as champion regent.
I think that's pretty reasonable, given what's going on.
By the way, the first ever non-binary champion regent. Let's not forget that.
And no one's taking that away from you.
No, some people say I stole the belt, but I say I platformed it. Visibility matters. It's what I said.
But with that, I mean, I would think of wrestling as someone who's, again, similarly to gaming, maybe a bit on the ignorant side. I would think of it as very hyper masculine, very like unreconstructed. So tell me, as a non-binary person, I mean, am I wrong? But as a non-binary person, tell me your experiences. And by the way, my cat is a very, very naughty cat. Listen to that.
I can hear it. It sounds tragic.
He's having all sorts. He's very into wrestling. He's actually is into wrestling. By the way. So tell me about that. Tell me about wrestling, gender, all that kind of stuff.
So I've gotten to perform both North and South. So I can tell you there are certainly different atmospheres. Now, I don't That is not to say no one in the South wasn't shockingly supportive. I appeared predominantly at Pro Wrestling Ego in Mississippi and Pro South Wrestling in Alabama. And those places I work with are treat me well, and even though I don't work with them anymore, they continue to support me, which has been great. But as far as the locker room goes, yeah, very manly, very masculine, very few women wrestlers, which, I mean, I'll talk a little more on intergender wrestling, but that was one paradoxically progressive thing in the South, was they couldn't find enough women wrestlers, even though, again, more visibility, they probably would have. So they were stuck because they couldn't have the same two women wrestle over and over. So they would wrestle with the men. And up here in the North, we do have intergender wrestling again, but that's because that's what modern indie wrestling here does. It's not done on mainstream TV. It's not done in WWE or AEW yet. And they all, have little gimmicky ones at times, but not full intergender wrestling. They will still have the divisions. They'll have, it won't be the men's championship. They'll have the world championship and then the women's championship. And whereas at Rise, this is the title. We've got our tag titles. I stripped the tag team of that as well. And this, the Grand Championship. And anyone there can challenge it, when I decide. So that's exciting. And, that answers a thorny question that any non-binary person would have if they went to WWE or AEW. What will they do with me? Where will they put me? What will they do? Because I know I certainly would not want to go into either division. What do you do? Well, it's not a problem, certainly not a problem at the promotions I've worked with. And within wrestling, there's arguments about intergender wrestling, whether it's believable or not, which my argument is The Undertaker. The Undertaker, for decades, a zombie cowboy, literal Undertaker as a wrestler, and no one questioned it. So do the impossible in wrestling. It's what it is, and intergender wrestling has never looked strange to me because it's wrestlers wrestling, and it's always different and unique and everything. So I love that here. And one thing I absolutely adore about moving here to the Northeast of America is here in Pennsylvania and New Jersey and surrounding areas, the LGBTQ plus wrestling community here is big. Last year, one of the 2 gigs I got to do was MV Young. He's a wrestler. He's his whole thing is being pansexual and the head of an entire polyam cult. He's got 15,000 romantic partners. That's his whole thing.
You must be pretty knackered.
Oh, I mean, it's exhausting. Or rather, Commander Sterling is a card-carrying member of the polyam cult. So, one of the, this thing's getting in there. I tell you what, right? If anyone is watching and thinking of transitioning, try a short one. Where was I? I lost the thread. Yes. So one of the gigs I got to do last year was the Polyam Cult Party, which was a wrestling event headed up by MV Young, and it had this backyard wrestle feel, and the backyard used, all the fence posts were pink, yellow, blue, like fully done up. It looked incredible. I'll be wearing my Pan Pride mask there. I've got various star-shaped masks, and I had one made in Pan colors, and I'm looking forward to flying that flag there myself. And we've just got amazing LGBTQ plus wrestlers here. Edith Surreal, who was a huge inspiration to me, not just in wrestling, but in gender expression. Molly McCoy, Effie, who also hosts a show called Effie's Big Gay Brunch. It's just so open here and accepting that it's been a trip. I'm still new here. I'm very much looking forward to getting more involved and becoming part of that. I used to think about maybe going to like AEW, on the telly. That would be nice. But now that I've seen the stuff here, like, this is what I want. This is what I want to do. I want to be part of what people like MV Young are doing, and what people like Effie have done, and companies like Wrestlers Lab. Because, at the end of the day, anyone can go for this if I let them.
Final question, Jim.
Yeah.
And this is a very, I think, appropriate question. It's a lovely question. And I think a great place to end. It's from Rich.
Mm-hmm.
Jim seems so lovely, so authentic and open, pretty unbelievable given the industry. I would love to know more about their resilience and sources of joy. It's just such a lovely question. I just felt it would be an affront not to ask it.
Yeah, no, that is a lovely question, and again, thank you for asking it. See, I've been asked about how I put up with a lot of stuff, because it's not just looking at the horrors of an industry that people don't want to see, the making of the sausage, shall we say, and just how grimy it can be and how demoralizing it can be, especially when what you've been arguing for years has been ignored, not just by companies, but by fellow members of the media who just care about, the latest big game. And then dealing with things like $15 million lawsuits and various attempts to, like, just recently someone tried to kill the YouTube channel by claiming videos on 3 separate days to trigger YouTube's 3 strikes policy, get the channel instantly killed. And now I'm talking with my lawyer to stop him from trying to do it, which is now to the point of harassment, which is one of many instances of harassment I've had within my career. And when people ask me how I deal with it, I say I do not bloody know. I do not bloody know how I've put up with it for this friggin' long. But if anyone deserves this belt, it's me.
I concur, and it's a great for everyone listening to this. It is very special. So,
but yeah, it's. I guess for me, I do the job I do because, especially knowing the struggles I had that I didn't even know I had, I don't know if I could do anything else. One of the reasons I keep at it so diligently is because, as someone with ADHD and as someone who didn't know that they had that, having a weekly show that I've kept consistently weekly now for 10 years, it's something to hold on to. It's a sense of structure. It's a sense of permanence. And that's difficult for someone with memory and focus issues, is this anchor. So there's an anchoring to the job that keeps me going. And as far as sources of joy that can offset it, I mean, obviously, with as much as I plug it and look for excuses to bring it up, the wrestling was, it kept my soul on life support before I finally figured out all that had been wrong with me. It was a huge source of joy and an ability to express myself. I get joy from, self-improvement and having a sense of ambition and a drive. If I'm not climbing a ladder, if I'm not finding some way around a ceiling, then I'm not too thrilled. Plus, I think just spite keeps me going at this point.
Same.
Of it, just screw everyone. I'm gonna keep going, and if I do fall, I'm gonna claw someone's eyes out on the way down. But yeah, joy is friends, and especially having moved up here where I'm closer to my friend Conrad, where our art director Justin came up as well, and a sense of a greater community here, a greater queer community, and that as well, just because I will keep bringing it back to visibility, more so even than this belt, is the visibility factor. Is being here and seen has already helped a lot of people, and that's more than I could have hoped for in my career. My hope for life is to put more good out than bad overall. and just try and do some good for people. And having been able to do that, that's a big reason to keep the engine on.
Jim, that was really, really lovely. And it's such an honor. And that point about visibility is so important. Many of the people who...
I'll never stop banging that drum.
It's so important. A lot of people who follow me and subscribe or listen to the podcast are young queer people, just queer people of any age. And seeing people like yourself out there, particularly as you've already mentioned, in Britain, there is such an onslaught against trans people at the moment, against anyone who isn't cisgendered. To see people like yourself with a platform is a lifeline for lots of people. I don't think we should understate just how significant it is at a very difficult time for people. And I hope lots of people, whether they're trans men, trans women, non-binary, on that, who are gender non-conforming, I hope they get some sense of not reassurance. I don't know what the right word is. Just having someone like you there and people like yourself.
Affirmation, affirmation is a big
affirmation.
It's a big part of
affirmation. That's it.
Of
Absolutely.
LGBTQ plus conversation, and yeah, like that. That was what I needed. So if I can provide what others need, then again, an honor and a privilege, and the best thing I could have done with my career, just to let people know that you are not invalid. If we're here, you're here.
And I think what's so important about that is, it can be the loneliest feeling in the world to be an LGBTQ person who hasn't come out, and there's this unique terror. It's particularly acute, of course, for trans people. But there was, that's why this is so important. I have to say, the internet has its downsides as well, because it also passes it's also an amplifier for some of the most bigoted and hateful people on earth. But at the same time, it back in the 90s when we were both growing up, it was, you could watch occasionally, I don't know what, there was Will and Grace or something. There wasn't very much, just seeing gay people, cisgender gay people was, and they were often portrayed as one-dimensional clowns. And now we can, the fact where with all the downsides of people like yourself, it does make a big difference, and it will make a big difference for people who watched or listen to this. Yeah.
I was about to go on another rant, and I realized, I looked at the time and was like, I'd just be retreading ground. It was a pleasure to come on. Definitely. Thank you.
Well, lots and everyone, please do follow Jim, subscribe. And for those who are watching this on YouTube, please do like the video, subscribe, or on the podcast, do give us 5 stars and also subscribe. Thanks everyone for watching, and lots of love to you, Jim.
Thank you.
Please support this channel for independent thought, discussion of the most important issues that we face.